Hey allies, our ROG Ally finally arrived and we thought we'd dive straight into Cyberpunk 2077 to see what this can do. First off, I had to run this in performance mode for it to be even semi-playable. And as you can see here, it's running fairly well, around 30 to 40 frames per second. And I'm using tweaked settings here, starting off with the medium preset. And I've turned the Fidelity FX Super Resolution to 1 to quality and just turn motion blur off. Everything else is at the medium preset here and I'm running at 1080p. And to be honest, it does struggle a bit. Most of the time it does stay around the 30 frames per second mark and it does go up to the 30 watts on the APU. But you will need that turbo mode on for the most part. To be fair, on turbo mode, even on battery, it does hold over 30 frames per second absolutely solid, and it does perform really well. Playing this at 1080p with over 30 frames per second is absolutely phenomenal, but you are only going to get around an hour to an hour and a half battery at most. It does struggle a little bit when you get down into town as well. It does dip under the 30 frames per second mark sometimes. Keeping that turbo mode on, you can see here in heavy combat, we are dipping very low to that 30 frames per second mark, but it does look absolutely glorious. And there was a small amount of input latency with the ROG Ally controller, as that frame rate did dip below the 30 mark. However, if you do drop this down to 720 and put it in performance mode, we get much better frames. Outside of the city, we are getting now between 50 and 60 frames per second. It still looks really good on the Ally screen. It's really hard to actually tell. Because this is full screen capture, you probably will notice the resolution difference. The performance gain for the difference on the Ally screen is actually quite incredible. So in performance mode, again, it does seem to perform very well outside of town. However, once we go into the city, we do start hitting that 30 frames per second mark again, and it does seem to also bring in a bit of latency. As we pump it back up to turbo mode, keeping those medium settings and the 720 range, we keep above that 30 much more stably. The input latency is all but gone, and for the most part it will stick around 40. So as much as we want this to outperform the Steam Deck, it definitely is doing that, but I don't think it's going to be able to hold medium settings completely playable unless you plug it in. And of course, if you are plugged in, then you are going to get that turbo 30 watt mode, and you can pump it back up to 1080p. It's a small difference on the Ally screen itself, but the 1080 mode does just look absolutely glorious, even at those medium settings, but you are going to want to be plugged in to keep that 30 watts. Unfortunately, the official ASUS dock has not arrived for me yet. The Ally has, but the accessories have not. As soon as I get that, I will look at this with the full turbo 30 watt mode to see just how much we can get out of this. Unfortunately, with the power distribution of any of the other docks that I've got from the Steam Deck, even with the ASUS charger plugged in, the power distribution is not giving enough power for the Ally to detect and push up to the 30 watt turbo mode. We'll certainly keep an eye on this, and if we do find a dock that works, we'll certainly let you know. And we'll be testing this out a lot more on the channel with the best settings guide for Cyberpunk 2077 on the ROG Ally for both battery and plugged in. I'll leave you with a bit more of the gameplay here without me talking, so you can get a better feel for the gameplay and performance on the turbo mode. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of the video.